Welcome to the Business Mechanic Show. I'm your host, Vaughn Sigmund, co-founder of Results Driven Leadership, where we help you and your team elevate their performance. On today's show, I did this a couple weeks ago. I'm really getting into this. Hope you're enjoying it. I want to break down a story I read on Reddit today regarding a happy and hardworking employee who was willing to go the extra mile, but it was all undone in a minute. This employee got a new manager and things changed, and they changed rapidly, not for the better. The teller of this story, he was suddenly managed by a manager who was oblivious to how to lead successful people. Let me say that again, how to lead successful people. This manager formed an opinion, and in a power move, a command and control move, took action to take control, which didn't work out so well in the end. Please, let me state my motto again. No matter what business, we're in the people business. And please always remember, as a leader, as a manager, people work for people. They do not work for companies. Their performance, their outcomes, their results, how hard they work, how happy they are at work is all up to you, their direct manager. Own it. So I'm going to share this story. And then in the end, I'm going to give you some thoughts and perspectives from my viewpoint on the issue. Before I get started, though, this show, the Business Mechanic Show, continues to grow our audience, and thank you so much for your support. Let me also add that if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the podcast or the channel. Like it, share it. That helps the algorithm reach more people. And so that was a shameless plug, but you all are awesome. I honestly mean that. I appreciate all your emails, your comments. You're reaching out to me. That's very humbling to me. Keep up the great work. Please help us out. Let's get into the story. I'm going to read this as it was written by the employee. It was titled, "No Overtime, No Problem." Been working at this job for some years when I got a new manager. A month or so into her working there, she came into my office and told me I wasn't allowed to work overtime anymore. And if I have any issues, we can discuss it. The way she said it sounded like she was expecting this to really hurt me. And I sent an email after she left my office just to confirm this conversation, confirm the conversation we had. And her response basically said, "Correct. No more time theft." Ooh, note that wording, time theft. What a way to reward a hard worker, calling them a thief, someone who was willing to work unasked for overtime, just put in the number of hours they needed to get a job done. This new manager calls him a thief. I move on. I didn't really like that accusation. I usually stayed a little late, about 30 minutes at the most, to finish up projects. A lot of projects came in last minute. Does this relate to any of y'all out there? Come in last minute, and other managers were thankful for my help. They'd actually rewarded this employee for putting in the extra work. So, based on my manager's request, I quit staying to finish projects and wouldn't start a new one if there wasn't enough time. No real issues, but some projects started falling through the cracks. I let the other managers know my manager told me no more overtime, and I'm just following orders. Fast forward, barely a month later, as I'm leaving for the day, she rushes to me asking if I can work on, you guessed it, a last-minute project. It's potentially worth millions. I explained how I have plans, and I'm not about to be a thief. Next day was too quiet. In the afternoon, I get a request to have a meeting with my manager in HR Ruh-roh. Usually you get a written complaint ahead of time. So I'm still a little off guard. I could at least be a little prepared for this meeting, but I go to it. And at the meeting, my manager reads off her grievances like it's an intervention. She frames it like I have an antisocial behavior issue. I'm insubordinate and I don't go the extra mile. Let that sink in for a minute. If you let her keep going, I wouldn't be surprised if I was somehow to blame for the company not reaching its goals. Do you think maybe that's where this is coming from? So she finally finished. And she had to have started writing that the night before and into the next day. I then asked if it's okay if I have my say. When granted, I pointed out a lot was just her opinion. And I'm overall pretty well liked around here. And I always do exactly what she says. However, and I want to go back to that, do exactly what she says. However, my manager likes to constantly move projects around while I'm working on them, and I'm not allowed overtime. And she, at this point, denies ever saying this. So I forward the email to my human resources department. The email that I sent my manager said, correct, no more time theft. Oh, gotcha. My manager then starts backtracking. Backstroke. She didn't mean permanently. Ooh. All of a sudden, HR takes me off the call. We'll talk to you a little bit later, senor. See ya. When they come back, it's just HR. And I start by saying, I'm not signing anything. They tell me, let's agree to disagree. This has been one big miscommunication, and they appreciate all the work I do. I asked to confirm if this was going to be held against me in any way, and HR said no. And HR went on to say, if I can stay late sometimes, great. But it's also okay that I leave after my 8 hours. Huh. Here's an idea. My manager later, this is a great end. My manager later quit. She was in it for less than a year. Wonder why. Let's not forget that inflammatory statement. Let me start sharing my perspective now. I cannot believe the choice of words. The new manager accused this hard worker of being a time thief and banned the employee from working overtime. Words are powerful, my friends, and because of her choice of words and because of this decision, projects started falling apart. Companies started losing sales, losing money. And in this brilliant CYA move, when bad stuff started happening due to the decision she made, instead of owning it like a great leader, like extreme leadership, she started looking for someone else to blame. Really bad move, but unfortunately very common. And when the time came for someone to step up, take responsibility, this boss tried to save her skin and throw her subordinate under the bus, accusing them of all this made up stuff, anything she could think of. Weak self-esteem, anybody? Now, if this manager was under some pressure to reduce overtime, I get it. I've been there. I've done that. Payroll is typically the first or second biggest cost of any organization. And there's many ways to wrap your strategy around reducing overtime. How would you handle it? What would be your approach to reducing overtime? If you were given pressure from above to get the overtime number down to 0 or way less, how would you do it without destroying a great employee? Your comments are appreciated. Share them with us, please. Luckily, this employee, they found a way to come out on top. You know, the employee's manager viewed this overtime work as time theft, which, man, that really sticks with me, sticks in my craw too. So she needed to put a stop to it. But her decision really had a negative effect on the company. Overtime's no joke. But this case didn't sound like a very harmful one. She was looking for the tallest nail. And this lady's concerned about overtime, understandable. Working long hours poses an occupational health risk. It kills hundreds of thousands of people each year. People working 55 or more hours per week face an estimated 35% higher risk of stroke and 17% higher risk of dying from heart disease. That's for real. And that's compared to people following the common standard of working 35 to 40 hours a week. Now, I've always been a hard worker. I'm not the smartest guy, so I always had to outwork everybody. And so I've always worked more than my fair share to get the job done. If it required me staying longer, I stayed longer. I took pride in that. But let me tell you, I enjoyed the 40-hour weeks when I got them. But I worked hard to get them. It takes a lot of effort, strategy in the right areas of leadership to give you the ability to work 35 or 40 hours a week without the work piling up or being poorly performed. So between 2000 and 2016, the number of deaths from heart disease due to working long hours increased by 42%. 16 years increased by 42%, and by stroke by 19%. However, judging from this Redditor's post, they had things under control. This employee had things under control, and their workflow was obviously integral to the company's success. And what counts above all else is the impact you make to your job. It's the quality of the work you do over the number of hours you put in. That's the value you bring to an organization, either as a manager or as a direct report. Employees should make these words their guiding principles. May I ask, don't you all want that in your team members? Quality of work while I am there. When your work is defined by the impact you make, not the output, it frees you from worrying too much about the optics of the hours you're seen putting in. I've always had the attitude, right or wrong, that I really don't care how many hours you work. Never been one to track my direct report's hours. And I really don't respect peers or other people, direct reports, who put in a tremendous amount of hours on a regular basis. Are there times that you need to put in the extra effort? Yes. But if that is a regular diet, something's wrong. I gauge people on how much they get done in the hours they do work. How about you? Especially if you're a manager. So instead of focusing on performing at 100% of the time you show up, you can progress based on your merit. If you're a sharp leader, you've made yourself disposable to your team. That's right. I said disposable. That wasn't a misstatement. You should be disposable. And if you're disposable now to your team, you've delegated, you've developed, you've coached, you've trained to the point of competency in the folks that are surrounding you that they don't need you anymore. That's the ultimate level of leadership. Read John Maxwell's book, 5 Levels of Leadership. It's at the top. Now that plays with some manager self-esteem. I know that. I've heard that. I've seen that. Many managers, unfortunately, feel threatened by a team that knows as much as they do, sometimes more. They feel they might be setting themselves up to be replaced. But I also know that one way is way more successful than the other. When I've got a trained team, I have to work less. When I have a trained team, a developed team, an empowered team, my team's always at the top. So instead, please focus on performing at 100% when you show up. Prioritize time management, communication, clear communication as to what is expected of them, fair empathy. And always remember that progress is based on merit. So how about this? Do you want a team that busts butt while they're there? Gets it all done with a smile on their face? Who doesn't? Of course you do. The main ingredient, this is secret sauce, y'all. The main ingredient in achieving that nirvana, our research shows that recognition, not calling them a time thief, but recognition is fundamental to the engagement and retention of your top performers. And of course, with that comes the profitability of the organization. I just read a recent study from Gallup that discovered that employees who reported that their managers were great at recognizing them were 40% more engaged than those who had managers who did not recognize them. Unfortunately, those managers who aren't very aware, skilled, willing, empathetic enough to thank people and recognize for their hard work, far too common. And it's so easy. The cost of recognizing somebody to drive engagement, drive productivity, to drive the work ethic that this person was displaying cost you nothing. And this Redditor's new manager failed. Epic fail. And luckily, this HR director, hires up in this organization, saw the situation clearly, and she's no longer with the organization. So there was, unfortunate for this manager, she's obviously one of these folks that were promoted into a management position, the accidental manager, without the skills being trained, learned by her, of being an effective leader. She did not have good mentorship. She did not have good leadership training. She was not put on the path for success. She was set up at some point for failure. I rarely ever blame this on the individual. I blame this on the individual that put her in that position for setting them up to not be successful. We rush into these decisions. We rush into getting them into the role and creating the output without regard to making sure we're setting them up to be effective in their new role. How to manage people. With all that, I'll wrap it up. One last reminder. People work for people, not companies. And the better you get at the people skills, the better you're going to be as a leader and the more successful you're going to be within your organization.